There are some times in the United States military when you're gonna have to salute probably an officer, right? There's also times when you won't want to salute, but a really good important one that you definitely need to salute in is a combat zone. And when you go to render that salute, you gotta make sure to say, "Sniper check, sir." What's up, my friends? Welcome to a brand new video. Now, of course, that first thing was a joke. You don't salute in a combat zone, all right? I used to do that to one of my lieutenants that was kind of like he was a pretty cool LT, mostly in the field. Like I'd be in the field or something like that, and I'd be like, "Sniper check, sir." And sure, it's funny if you're pretty cool with that individual. I would not suggest doing that to like your battalion commander or maybe a lieutenant or somebody else that you don't know, but it was fun. So in this video, I want to talk about sometimes when you will salute, when you won't salute, give you a little bit of a heads up, but there's a ton. I'm not going to cover every single one because that would just take forever, and there's some gray areas on some of them as well, so it's kind of tricky, but more of the common ones. Some of the common scenarios that you might run into of when you're going to have to salute maybe an officer, but there are also times when you won't salute an officer, you'll salute another non-commissioned officer, but we might dive into that a little bit, so make sure to stick around for the whole video then, I guess. My scenarios are Army-based, but this should apply for the most part in the military. If there's some individuals out there that are in the Navy, Air Force, or something and watching this, and they're like, "Hey, we do it a little bit differently in my branch of service," be sure to let me know down in the comment section down below. But, of course, a time when you are going to salute an officer is when you're out and about, right? You're in uniform, that officer's in uniform, maybe you're walking to the motor pool, from the motor pool to the office, whatever. You see an officer, and when you're within a reasonable distance from them, you would salute them and give them the greeting of the day. Some units you give her like a unit motto. Like when I was in the 3rd ACR, we would say, Brave Rifles, and they would say AIA or something along those lines, right? And so you have usually like a greeting, or you can just simply say, "Good morning, sir or ma'am," "Good afternoon," whatever the case might be. If they're really far away, obviously no need to render a salute from a far distance. "Good morning, sir." That'd be a little ridiculous, all right? But you also got to do it not too close to them because you got to give them enough distance for them to render that salute back and then maybe even reply back to you. If you do it too close just as you're about to pass them, it's a little bit obnoxious. Also, if it's not convenient for them to be able to salute, you wouldn't want to salute them. If they have their hands full, they're trying to carry something or whatever, you can just give them the simple greeting, "Afternoon, sir," "Afternoon, ma'am," whatever, but you don't need to salute them if they got their hands full and they're not going to be able to easily render a salute. Then it's just kind of common sense. You don't salute, you just kind of acknowledge the individual. If you're walking in uniform and maybe you have another buddy with you or some other soldiers with you, typically you all will just kind of salute. Maybe one of you will give some kind of greeting type of thing, but you don't need to have it where they need to all stop and come to attention. Typically you just kind of keep walking, you guys all kind of render your salute. There are sometimes no salute areas, right? Sometimes they have them marked, especially I've seen flight lines or certain other kind of places where they may even have signs that say no salute zones. Typically in combat zones or in the field, you won't salute. I remember especially in a combat zone on mission, definitely wouldn't salute. You're on a mission and LT walks up, you wouldn't want to salute them because you don't want to let everybody know they're officers, even though they may be able to figure that out if they got binos or something like that and see their rank, but still nonetheless, the customs and courtesies you don't usually select in a combat zone, especially out in a mission. On the base, I want to say we usually still did for the most part, unless there's a no salute zone, but out in the field, also typically a thing where you don't salute, but some units may have different policies, but most of the units I think I remember we wouldn't salute in a field. Now, if it's let's say you and a group of soldiers, it gets a little bit kind of tricky with that kind of scenario. If it's just you guys hanging out, you're kind of hanging around or whatever, and the first person that realizes that, hey, there's an officer coming about, they should call the group to attention and everybody just renders a salute. Now, if it's a thing where you're part of a detail in a working task type of thing, but you're not actively engaged, then you typically just kind of salute for the rest of the group while they continue working for the most part. But there is sometimes some gray area where some scenarios would make everybody want to salute and some areas where you wouldn't. But again, it kind of goes back to that first thing where if it's inconvenience, right, you're in the middle of trying to change out a tire and you got a tire in your hand, you don't need to drop the tire so you can render a salute. If you are both in civilian clothes, right, you see an officer, you know they're an officer, they're in civilian clothes, you're in civilian clothes, no need to salute. Typically, that's not a thing where you salute. But if you're in uniform and they're in civilians, then typically, based on the regulation, you would still salute that individual. But there are some gray areas with that as well, where there's times you wouldn't salute that officer, even though you know they're an officer and you're in uniform. But if you don't know if they're an officer, you don't need to kind of salute that individual. It's just typically if you know that person and you're in uniform and you know, hey, that's the battalion commander, they're in civilian clothes, then yeah, typically you still render that salute. If that officer is in another branch of service, even if they're in a foreign military, that's usually one of our allies. I mean, I guess you really wouldn't be saluting the enemy anyways, hopefully. But if you're saluting, like, let's say, you're working with some Canadians, some, British individuals, and you know that they're an officer, then yeah, typically you're still supposed to salute those officers. If they're a part of another branch of service than you, you're still supposed to salute them. Officers even salute other officers. If the lower ranking officer, like you got a lieutenant and they come encounter with a captain, that lower ranking officer renders the salute first and they salute that individual. There are some times where you may salute indoors, but typically you don't salute indoors. But the times when you do salute indoors, like when you're reporting for like the promotion board, you usually give a hard knock on the door, they tell you to enter, and you go up to the president of the board, which might be like a sergeant major, not even an officer, and you'll render a salute saying, Private so-and-so, Specialist so-and-so, whatever the case is, reporting to the president of the board. There's also other times when you're changing over a formation. If you're in charge of that formation and someone is coming up to take charge of that formation, you usually render a salute to that individual when they take charge of that formation. There's a report you have to give sometimes in the morning where you're giving that to the platoon sergeant, and those are times when you may salute someone that's not an officer, but most of the times you're going to salute people, it's going to be an officer. In the comment section down below, let me know if you can think of some other scenarios, because there's a ton, right? And so maybe rather than me dragging this video out to give you every example, maybe you can read about some in the comment section down below. For those of my viewers that are currently watching this, that are currently in the military, or maybe some veterans, maybe you got some funny stories about saluting an officer, let me know down in the comment section down below. A funny one I remember I was working in an ammo holding area. We were actually out in the field, and I had this younger soldier that the battalion commander came up to check on our ammo holding area, and he walks up to try to shake his hand. And the battalion commander was like, how about you render a salute first? Pretty crazy. Yeah, I don't know what that guy was thinking. Yeah, that was pretty dumb. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you're subscribed. If you want to support the channel, there's merch you can purchase. You can also just hit that thumbs up. That's completely free. Hit that thumbs up. But nonetheless, I appreciate you for watching. I'm Christopher Chaos, and I'll see you next time. See ya.